Young and Drum Podcast. I'm RJ Young. He's Brandon Drum. Brandon, how you doing, man?
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner
Better.
Good.
Better.
Good. We like better.
Yesterday was rough.
On a number of fronts, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was bad. Health was not my friend yesterday. But it's better today, so everything's all good.
So the bye week is over, and we are 2 days, as of the taping of this podcast, from Oklahoma, Iowa State, which is a 7 o'clock kick on Big Fox. And the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's rankings are out, and everybody's pissed about Georgia being at number 6, which I understand, but they wouldn't like the way that I ranked them anyway. What did you think about OU being at 9?
Well, I didn't mind the 9 except for the Georgia. You're right. That the Georgia thing is, and I'm sitting here and I'm watching Barton Simmons and Colin and all these guys on the 247, their live show before you and I get on. So I'm watching that and listening to what they're saying, and they're saying the exact same thing we're all saying is, how does that work? Like, you obviously you basically just nullified a loss to a sub 500 team. And then at the same time, how they ranked Baylor was really confusing because Baylor has wins on the road by almost 3 touchdowns against 2 top 25 teams, according to college football playoffs. So how they rank things, I don't get it at all. It's really confusing. I mean, Baylor should be a top 10 team at the least if they're going to go out. If they're going to use the exact same metric they use for Georgia that they're using for Baylor. That's honest, and Baylor's undefeated. Oklahoma's lone loss is to the number 16 team in the country. Baylor's is to the number 80th. I don't know where South Carolina's ranked. They're not in the top 25, I can guarantee you that, because they're not even a 500 team. So the ranking was really confusing. The one thing we do know is that they didn't put as much credence in LSU's wins as first thought, because everybody thought they would be number 1. They liked Ohio State's schedule better. And the other thing we know is that if Alabama loses to LSU, they're likely not going to get into the college football playoffs. I mean, that's what we do know. We know that Oklahoma has a chance to win their way back in. It may be a 30, 40% chance, but they have a chance. The Alabama losing against LSU this weekend would not be good because their schedule has been that bad. They don't have a lot of chances coming up. Their best chance would be, obviously, Auburn, but then they're not going to make it to the SEC title game. And that's going to hurt, especially if Oklahoma is playing another top 15 team in the Big 12 title game. So all this stuff comes in, and then you got Clemson, who they've gotten, kind of scorned for their scheduling. And I know it's not their fault. Their conference is just bad. But at the same time, say they go off and they lose to South Carolina, there's no way they're getting in. I mean, there's a lot in play here. Obviously, there's a lot left. There's a month and change left in the season. So there's going to be a lot of changing going on here in the top 4. It's going to be a fun ride.
I don't know. There's going to be a lot of changing if for no other reason than Ohio State has to play Penn State and LSU and Alabama got to play each other. That's why there's going to be a lot of changing. But to the point about Georgia and them being ranked at 6 and Oklahoma at 9, and you're going, okay, eye test, which makes you want to gouge out my eyes. But I also think that if you want to rank them based on what they've done so far, you're going to give Georgia a lot of credit for beating up on a Notre Dame team that got beat by 31 against Michigan, and Michigan got beat like they stole something against Wisconsin, and Wisconsin looked utterly hapless against Ohio State. So that one, I think, is going to stick in the craw of a lot of people, but the nice thing about it is, that'll probably change next week. Mm-hmm. I don't think that Utah and Oregon is a problem at 7 and 8, because even if Utah and Oregon end up in the Pac-12 title game, the win, if either one of them won it, would only give them 2 ranked team wins.
Right. Oklahoma at 3 or 4.
And Alabama, the vaunted Alabama, has never gotten into the playoff without at least 3 ranked wins in any of the 5 playoffs, and they're the most frequent member. They've been to every single one.
Yep.
And this year, that's what it's about. Oklahoma would have at a minimum 3 wins against ranked opponents. In Texas, you beat up on Oklahoma State and Baylor. They helped you by ranking Baylor. Like, that was the real thing here. They helped
by
you.
ranking Oklahoma State too. That was a big deal.
Oh, excuse me. I meant Oklahoma State. They helped you by ranking Oklahoma State.
I agree.
And
100%.
then Kansas State is ranked on the strength of beating Oklahoma. And you might end up getting Baylor or Kansas State in the Big 12 title game. So you would have 4 if you run the table. So that resume would be better than the ones that Oregon and Utah would put together, which means the Pac-12 be on the outs looking in. But turd in the punch bowl for me isn't Georgia. I mean, if Georgia wins the SEC championship, they're in. Like, everybody would put them in, even with the one loss. Same thing with the turd in the punch bowl is LSU, because if they lose to Alabama, but they finish the season with 1 loss, even they could be the Alabama of 2017 where they get in without having even won the division. And then there's that
somebody on our board.
Of it.
Let me ask you this real quick. Let me ask you, because I want you to finish, because I think this goes into what you're about to say. But somebody on our board said something pretty interesting. It may not have been our board, it may have been Twitter. I don't remember. But somebody said the ranking of number 2 LSU ahead of or behind Ohio State. They said that they liked that more than anything because that gave them the feeling that even though LSU might lose in the SEC title game or to Alabama or to anybody else, that told them that maybe their resume isn't as ballyhooed to the committee as once thought, and they could be knocked out with a loss. Do you buy that?
No.
Okay.
Because it gets to my point about how rankings work and how the perception of who you played works. Because the reason that Minnesota is ranked 17 at 8-0 in a Power 5 conference is because they happen to play a schedule that people call weak, right?
Yeah.
And it's not in your control how good your opponent is in 9 or 10 games a year, right? You have the game that you have. And I say 9 or 10 because games like OU, UCLA are scheduled 10 years in advance. Same thing with LSU and Texas. And, when OU plays Georgia in 2023, who knows who's going to be good and who's not. So, but there's a couple of those games that you get to pick that probably didn't pick somebody who's going to be good. But I tend to believe that Minnesota's non-conference schedule is actually pretty stout because South Dakota State could win a national championship this year. Georgia Southern just beat Appalachian State, and they were decent to begin with. And everybody knows that Fresno State ain't no easy win. And you don't really get credit for beating them because people think you should, and yet all Fresno State does is go 8-5, 9-3 every single year. So there's that. But I get pissy because if Minnesota beats Penn State this weekend, they probably don't crack the top 10. Right, even as Penn State is the number 4 team in the country. And let's make it trippy. Let's say Ohio State loses to Penn State, doesn't play in the Big Ten championship game, and Minnesota wins the Big Ten championship. Who gets in from the Big Ten?
It's a good question. So you're asking if Ohio State. Okay, reset that scenario for me one more time.
Ohio State loses to Penn State.
Okay.
Minnesota
Penn State loses to Minnesota?
No. Yes,
Okay.
or yes, sure. However it works, Minnesota ends up in as the Big Ten champ, right? If they do it with a loss, that makes it easier to swallow. But let's say they go undefeated. Let's say they beat up on Penn State and Wisconsin, and they beat whomever.
You have to have them in there if they beat all those guys.
Well, the only team to get in there that far back was Ohio State in 2015. When they started out ranked 16th.
OU was 15th.
But they didn't win. They didn't win it, and they were 15th. They weren't 16th. My point is, Ohio State was 16th, and this would be the team starting out 17th. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. The difference is people still believed in Urban Meyer, and Tom Herman had put together a pretty outstanding offense, even
it's Ohio State.
going through 3 different quarterbacks. And that's the other part about that really pisses me off is that you say, and it's Ohio State. Like, and people say, and it's Oklahoma. It's like, you know what? Friggin' Baylor's undefeated. All right? Minnesota's undefeated.
I'm not disputing that. I'm actually on your side on this. I
I get that, but I'm saying you said it. You said, and it's Ohio State.
I know, but I'm just going off national perception. Yeah.
I mean, we're free thinkers, dude. And that's my point. And then I think that the chaos begins if Ohio State loses. I don't think the chaos really begins until then. And if Ohio State runs the table, cool. That makes it easy, kind of like Clemson. You just nope, you're clearing away number one, and we all expect them to I expect Ohio State to win a national championship this year. I just do. Everybody they match up with, I see a monster on the defense, and I see a back end. Like, we're in the Jim Thorpe Award selection committee process trying to narrow down the semifinalists, right? We argued about him and Brandon Fuller. And that's so that's two, right? And Fuller plays the bullet position, which is basically nickel, which is the toughest position to play in the secondary. And then you're talking about Chase Young, who we all acknowledge is a monster, but they got monsters all over that defensive line, and Larry Johnson Sr. just keeps turning them out. And then we have this thing where people want to say, Chase Young should win the Heisman, but J.K. Dobbins has been second, third best running back in the country all year, and Justin Fields is putting together a Trevor Lawrence kind of season. The one that Trevor Lawrence had last year, Justin Fields is having this year. So I'm going, and then wide receiver, they just match up. They're not as good as Alabama or Oklahoma, but they're good enough to beat you. And the thing about LSU is I want to see what they're able to do when it comes to the RPOs that Tua's got to run with Jerry Jeudy in the slot, because I think if you can't take away those slants with Jacob Phillips and Kayvon Chasen, you're going to have a long day. But even so, Derek Stingley, for me personally, that's the best defensive back in the country. Just period.
Oh, you think Stingley is the best in the country?
I think Stingley is the best defensive back in the country.
Wow.
But I'm outvoted.
No, I mean,
I'm outvoted.
I think he has the highest upside. I don't know that he is playing the best, but yeah, he definitely has the highest upside.
Yo, man.
I would 100%. I've seen the guy live plenty of times that I would agree.
I'm just talking about when he matched up against Colin Johnson. Colin Johnson got nothing. Against Florida, he had a pick in the end zone. Against Auburn, he did a 360-degree turn off a back pedal, spotted the ball, and still swapped it out of Seth Williams' hands.
Yeah, he's a freak.
And I get it. I get that there are wide receivers that are like, nah, I got Derek Stingley. It's like, yeah, well, you're a wide receiver. You should win 8 out of 10 every single time.
How would he do against? We're gonna know. I think to your point, we're gonna know exactly how good he is this weekend, and if say he went up against a CeeDee Lamb in the playoffs or something like that, you would know how good he is.
Well, I mean, but that's the other thing. Like CeeDee,
because Colin Johnson isn't somebody I think of as an elite receiver.
And that's the thing, though. When you talk about elite receivers, I'm not so sure how we grade them as correct now, because CeeDee had 110 yards receiving against Alabama, right? In a loss, in a lopsided loss. But you're going, he cooked Patrick Surtain. I'm going, okay, the guy's playing corner. Don't know where the wide receiver's going. They don't know when the play is going to be snapped. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They just know that they got to stick to this guy in front of them. Mm-hmm. And I put more of an emphasis on what does the defensive back do on this play than I do on what does the wide receiver do on this play. So to say, how do they match up against CeeDee? I'm saying, okay, does CeeDee make 90% of his catches on a defensive back? Because that's the only way to grade. Well, no. You're guessing. You don't know.
I mean, that night he did. There were jump balls a lot of the times he was coming down with them.
Well, and that's the other part, right? So jump ball to whom and to where? Because if it's a jump ball, it's not like a tip-off in the NBA where you get to jump at the referee's whistle. The ball's being thrown to a person. Now, the fact that ball is thrown into a 50-50 spot does not really mean that the defensive back has the same opportunity to catch it as the wide receiver. And so all I'm saying is I think that Stingley is better than any other defensive back in the country, but would that make him better than an above average wide receiver who knows what he's doing? And I'm going, it's like offense versus defense is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Offenses have all the advantages, and I don't think we always do a good job of adjusting for those advantages when it comes to grading out players. That's all.
So here's how I look at a DB. And this is why I've always been kind of still on the Parnell Motley bandwagon a little bit. Because he's always there. I mean, he is.
But they're all always there. The ones that are good.
No.
The ones that are good are all always there.
Right. Okay. Well, then you're helping me out here.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is that I think that DB, if they were good, they're always going to be there. And people that say that, well, they got beat on a catch here or they did this. Yes, like to your point, the offense has the advantage on this. A receiver is usually 3 or 4 inches taller than the DB. So the odds of them coming down with the ball are greater than the DB coming down with the ball. That is always going to be the case.
So I'm gonna.
So what I'm saying is that
I want to ask you another question after the break about that because I think
Okay.
I know where you're headed. Let's take a break.